Hello and welcome. In this lecture, I want to talk about the preprocessor. We briefly discussed this concept in early lectures, mainly just citing it as an advantage. The main reason I want to talk about it a little right now, early in class, is because it's being used in every single program. And I want to talk about the has include directives, which is a preprocessor command. So if I want to talk about that, I first have to describe the preprocessor in general. This is going to be a high level description. As we go through class, we will talk about more of the preprocessor in terms of its different directives and so on. But to just understand the basics, this preprocessor is a unique feature of C. It's not found in many other languages, and it's very advantageous, and you should try to understand it. And we should try to use as much as possible. It basically allows for programs to be easier to develop by the developer. It makes programs easier to read, it makes them easier to modify, and it makes them easier to port. So it allows for a lot of advantages. And so to have a description, understand what it is in a early learning of C is important. It's a part of the C compilation process, but it's recognized as specialistic. And just like it says preprocessor in the name, it implies that something's going on before you process the code. So analyzes certain statements in your code before it actually analyzes the program itself. It does things before it compiles essentially. So it's telling your compiler that, hey, before you actually convert into this code, before you generate the object files, before you generate and do all the linking and generate the executable, first do this. And so because you do this stuff before you compile, you can optimize things and you can make things a lot easier. Now, you will often have these preprocessor commands at the very top of your source code, but they can be anywhere. They can be anywhere interspersed throughout your code. One of the big ones that we are going to talk about is the include. So the way that you can identify preprocessor statements in your source code is they have a pound sign before them. So they have that number sound, and that has to be the first no non-space character on the line in order to be a preprocessor command, also known as preprocessor directive. Now, as I mentioned, our first challenge actually used a preprocessor directive. It was the include directives. We know it's a preprocessor directive because we saw the symbol. We don't exactly know what the include does. We will talk about that in another lecture, but it is a preprocessor command. It is a preprocessor directives. And again, because it's used so widely, basically in every program, because every program is going to have an include, I wanted to talk about it early on, but it does not just mean that there's an include. The preprocessor can do many other things and have other commands. Some of the things we will talk about as we go through this course concerning the preprocessor are things like being able to create constants. Constant is a concept where it is a variable essentially that never changes its value. It's a data that never changes. That's how you can think about it, because we have not even talked about variables yet. But you can create constant in the preprocessor, and this optimizes your code, make it more efficient and run faster. There's also this concept of a macro, which is an entire another topic in itself. But a macro is another preprocessor directive. And the way that you can create the macros is you can use the define statement. And so we talk about the define, we will talk about creating constants, but you should be familiar with the preprocessor concept and utilizing these different things like include, define, constant. Include we'll talk about specifically in the next lecture, but a benefit of this is that you can create your own library files. And we talked about what a library is. A library is just reusing existing code. So it's code that you don't have to write. The C program language comes with its own standard library that does many things for you, like display output to the console, read and write files, handle streams, all sort of different things. If you are familiar with Java, similar important Java APIs, application programming interfaces. Other examples of a preprocessor directive would be conditional things like the if, def, the end if, the else, or the in if not defined statement. We'll talk about those in more detail as well, but all these preprocessor directives help with the efficiency of the code, and they run before the compiler actually runs. It's run before any code is has generated any object files or executable files, but we'll cover all this in much more details in future lecture. I wanted to give you a little taste of it beforehand, because we need to understand it before we can understand what we are doing with the include statement, which is what we are going to talk about next. Thank you.